Welcome to Outside the Box. I'm your host, Margot. You are tuned in to Leaders of Eugenics. If you watched my last video, which was the quest for the perfect society, the beginning of eugenics, of course, with the originator, Dr. Sir Francis Galton of the Victorian era. Such an unfortunate era, but yes. So now, the quest for the perfect society was coined, of course, by Dr. Galton. So now we're moving on to the seven prominent leaders in the medically enhanced field as far as eugenics when it moves forward to euthanasia, as well as the genocide of Nazi Germany. So beginning with John Harvey Kellogg. J.H. Kellogg was born in 1852. He is a health reformer and physician, famous for his biological principles. J.H. Kellogg was not only an inventor, but he was also the creator of the famous granola and Kellogg's cornflake cereal. Growing up, J.H. Kellogg subjected his younger brother Will to verbal and physical abuse throughout their childhood, forcing him to run alongside his bike to record his thoughts, and often invading his privacy. How he recorded his thoughts, I don't know if what his brother was saying or how he did this. However, just to perform an experiment like this at such a young age is a red flag. So he was already into what was going on in the 1800s. So this, of course, is the attempt to control his brother through psychological breakdown and to lower his brother's self-esteem and confidence level. This is to be able to later on control him and probably make him his flunky or something. So Dr. Kellogg developed this food for his patients at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. So that's where the granola and cornflakes and stuff came in, because that's what he was feeding the patients at the sanitarium that he was superintendent of in 1876. So his main focus was improving his patients' digestion and health. Kellogg was a devout Seventh-day Adventist. His health principles were integrated with his religious beliefs. So he believed that a bland diet and vegetation and being a vegetarian, which is no meat, would prevent masturbation and other sexual excesses, which Kellogg believed led to various illnesses during that time. So he thought it was the food that we ate had something to do with mental illnesses and disabilities and so on. So he and his wife, they never consummated their marriage. They raised 42 foster children and adopted 7. My theory is that maybe he could have been doing some kind of observations as far as diets are concerned, what they grew up to become, what kind of behaviors they had, personalities, so on and so forth. So after establishing the Race Betterment Foundation and becoming a vocal proponent of the eugenics pseudoscientific race belief and improving the human race through, of course, selective breeding. It sounds so horrible, but the more that I go over this and I read these things, and it's like, well, God, coming from that era, it's like, well, we need selective breeding. Something is going on. Trying to get that problem under control. Probably had a lot of pressure and ideas and everything going through these men's head to try to better their society instead of having so many disadvantaged people as far as illnesses go. So J.H. Kellogg established the Race Betterment Foundation. This is when Kellogg began flying out to promote his ideas and advocate the sterilization movement. So, of course, him and his brother, W.K. Kellogg, of course, they had some sort of sibling rivalry. Kellogg founded the first company, which is the younger brother. He actually founded the first company to share his brother's healthy food with, and which in turn gave him rights to the earnings. But wanting to appeal to the masses, of course, WK was like, come on, John, we need to, get on board with putting sugar in this cereal so we can make more money and broaden the commercial brand name. Of course, this led into like a bitter fight and whatever. They went to court, and of course, WK won against J.H. Kellogg. So he took over the family name and all the rights. So after losing to his brother, J.H. Kellogg began to explore the more advanced side of medical practices and some of his medical theories and practices, of course, were very unusual. Not only did J.H. Harvey create healthy snacks and cereal, he was also the inventor of exercise equipment. One of his inventions being what he called inner hygiene, or the yogurt flush. He believed with the use of yogurt enemas, this would help prevent what J.H. Kellogg called auto-intoxication. His theory was being the source, again, of what we consumed in our daily life. So he felt like if you took a yogurt enema, this could probably help fight against those toxins. He labeled meat and alcohol as race poisons that contributed to race decay, believing a pure diet was essential for improving the racial qualities of future generations. So vegetarian diets and vegan, of course, and glucose-free foods are very common now. So I think that most likely might be a contribution of our eugenic leaders. But yeah, not only were the medical procedures unethical and inhumane, what they chose for leisure that contributed to the holistic era, which was the Fitter Family Contest. Again, it was done at state fairs. Again, that's kind of weird. Kind of think of like either these people gorging food or you're like some super health nuts, I don't know. But at state fairs, they were judged on eugenical worth, similar to livestock competitions. The ERU, which is the Eugenics Record Office. This was the inventory and record of hereditary traits. The supporters of the Fitter Families, American Eugenics Societies, American Red Cross from 1920 to 1924, the Better Baby Movement, and the Rockefeller Foundation. And these types of organizations were put in place acting as a census of families with good genes. These type of records were made public, but were published in magazines like Women's Home and Companion. And as we move forward, we know that eugenics goes deeper and deeper. First, it went from mental illness and disabilities to being a certain complexion and so on and so forth, and being below the poverty line. And during this time, like magazines like that, you knew that being below the poverty line, you probably were not going to be reading those. So, moving on to William and Charles Mayo, the so-called brilliant brothers behind the Mayo Clinic. They were the sons of William Rowell Mayo, who was a physician and general practitioner and also an examining physician for the U.S. Army in 1865. The two brothers, they developed a group practice in the 1890s, which laid the groundwork, again, for the multidisciplinary approach as far as the eugenics era in what they practiced to improve the human race. So the world-renowned Mayo Clinic, which is in Rochester, was very influential in the development of modern medical practices, so influential that the Mayo family implicated the eugenics law, which was highlighting the recognition of the complex and hazards to personal rights that involved the eugenics movement because of the extreme applications. So they knew that some of these practices were unethical and, and very harmful, so they figured, okay, so we have to do something to cover ourselves. So in 1925, the sterilization law authorized sterilization of the feeble-minded and insane. And when they say sterilization in this, I feel like, again, that was like a cover-up. It began with sterilization. Yes, we don't want you guys to procreate because we don't need any more children with mental disabilities or any more people just roaming with all these problems. So, but I figured that was a cover word for the actual experiments that some of these people were doing during that time. But I also feel like they didn't know any better. Like I said, the thought process evolves as well as everything else in the world. So, so Dr. William Rowell Mayo, we're just going to say Dr. Mayo Sr., he, of course, had more of an interest in eugenics and coming up with some supplies or equipment that he discovered to use for medical studies and demonstrations. It is a foreign word. It's maripiatinagine, or cut nose. So whatever he was doing with the nasal passages and stuff, I don't know if this was for allergies or what he had going on, but he used that to study and demonstrate what he was doing as far as with eugenics. But it was deemed unethical and dehumanizing as far as what is read today. So Dr. Mayo introduced the young Mayos to the medical practices of eugenicists and the eugenics movement. So the boys were more involved during or after World War II, which would be kind of during the Nazi genocide. So it was more, like I said, a movement, if anything. So I think throughout the years it got a little bit more experimental. Moving on to Albert Preddy and Joseph DeJarnette in 1906 to 1943. Dr. Joseph DeJarnette, he was the superintendent of Western State Hospital. As you can see, all these, during this time, it had to be something wrong. All of these individuals were involved in the mental illness and disability, state hospitals and state schools and so on and so forth. But Dr. DeJarnette was also known for torturing countless patients, and while doing this, he would whisper the words of Adolf Hitler. Oddly, this was known as the progressive era. I guess they felt as if with all these experiments we're coming up with like medical breakthroughs. So it was called the progressive era during that time. So Albert Preddy was an American physician as well as a politician. So we can get laws passed and everything as far as this eugenics era goes on. He's also the founder of the Virginia State Colony. This was for epileptics and the feeble-minded. In 1915, this was when the first recorded instance of eugenic sterilization in Virginia. So again, by Albert Preddy being a politician, he was able to get certain laws passed. And during this time, this is when DeJarnette, which was the Western State Hospital superintendent, and Albert Preddy, joined forces, and that was in 1924. So now Robert Foster Kennedy, he was a neurologist, and he held a position at the National Hospital for Paralyzed and Epileptics. In 1910, he accepted a position at the Neurological Institute in New York, and that was the very first kind in the United States during that time. So between 1936 and 1960, in the pursuit of the eugenic ends, these doctors, they all came together and urged the colleagues to go ahead to continue this. Let's adopt a program of sterilization and what is called euthanasia. So they moved on from eugenics and the study of it and, trying to get their fill around to euthanasia. And this, again, was for the feeble-minded and the hopelessly unfit. Kennedy was also president of the Association for Research in Nervous and Mental Diseases. In 1938, president of the American Neurological Association. So all these doctors, again, it was the era that it was a lot of problems with obviously brain development, intellectual disabilities, all types of things that I almost feel like they needed these doctors. But like, again, the thought process and trying to figure out some kind of medical cure, they had to do some things. And I think some people just went a little bit too far as their experiments goes. But, never want to put yourself in their shoes completely. But just to live in that type of era, it's like, okay, what do we do? Next is the infamous Joseph Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, who conducted inhumane and often deadly medical experiments during the Nazi racial theory, which was to a superior race. So again, with the evolvement of the quest for a perfect society and the eugenics, again, being creative and thinking, okay, so maybe it's because of the complexion, or it's because of this, it's because of that. So they start thinking, and then with the research, I don't know what type of things they came up with during this time. Nazi Germany thought that the Aryans were the superior race. I don't know where that came from. But, they started moving on to, it's not just that, it's because you're poor, or it's because you're this. They're like trying to figure out all these things and end up harming a lot of people during this time. So what I would call the good side of the eugenics movement is when, of course, it was aimed at improving the human population during a time period that mental illness was a huge genetic problem. And Sir Francis Galton, he was the one that did not want to harm anybody. It was like the beginning of it. And I felt that he went about it the right way as far as trying to improve something that was obviously a major problem. And that was through demographics and behavioral psychiatry, as well as philosophy. So before eugenics turned into the Nazi genocide, to no longer be in good birth, but to be in good death. A plan to heal an unfortunate era, which again would be the continuation of the Victorian era. Obviously, through this time period, it was a problem to be implemented through philosophical strategy, not devious, overly thought, inhumane abuse, which it ended up being. Making use of mechanical engineering and experimenting on people, which they then called subjects. It wasn't just for the feeble-minded and mentally disabled or insane. And once again, it went too far with the original eugenics movement of Sir Francis Galton and the philosophical cure that he thought would make. These people, again, had to be too creative and go a little bit too far, and a lot of people lost their lives to that. But then, like I said, now we know about being vegan and trying to be a little bit more healthy to save the human race, or however you want to put it. And of course, we've moved on to medications and things like that to be able to help us now. But I'd like to thank you for tuning into the Leaders of Eugenics. I'm your host, Margot. You're tuned into Outside the Box. Please subscribe, please like as well, and I will see you next time. Please stay safe and informed.